thanks very much. Well, it's great to hear Sir Gordon's latest thinking on sustainable intensification. I broadly agree with many of his points and ways forward in this. So what I want to do is really almost serendipitously tackle that last question that he had up there on the board on trying to look really at the policy dimensions of sustainable intensification and how policies have, in many cases, driven unsustainable intensification, but how they can also be a big part of the solution. Here's my own list of some of the big challenges, but I think Sir Gordon's covered this more than adequately of some of the key challenges, some old, some new, in terms of how do we achieve both food security and environmental stability and sustainability. I want to point out, sir, there's two critical issues, or flip side of lack of sustainability. One is what people usually talk about is unsustainable intensification, and this is the kinds of examples we always get in terms of essentially failed intensification, such as, for example, surface and groundwater depletion leading to the RLC crisis, salinization in poorly drained irrigated lands in South and Central Asia, waterlogging and soil compaction and other issues due to continuous paddy production, water pollution, adverse health, and so forth in Asia, Latin America, and elsewhere, and soil erosion due to excessive tillage on steeply sloping lands, and even in mainstream soil areas, as we saw on the map that Gordon shows. But I think we also need to understand that lack of intensification is a huge source of instability and unsustainability as well. Some just obvious examples are soil fertility depletion in sub-Saharan Africa due to declining fallow, inadequate application of soil nutrients, deforestation and conversion of rangelands due to extensive crop production, overgrazing of remaining rangelands in Africa and Asia due to dependence on extensive grazing, leading to declining rangelands, which is going to be a significant problem in the context of rapid growth in meat demand. But how do policies contribute to these issues, and how do they help us get out of it? So let me just run through a few areas in the critical importance of policies for sustainable agriculture productivity growth. And I'm going to give like 3 slides where I started looking at policy-induced negative consequences for sustainability and recommendations then for reform. One of the key areas is water and irrigation policies, and we've been left with ineffective policies for many years, from the time of investment in systems, and many irrigation systems built in Asia, Latin America, and elsewhere. Just critical parts of investments were left out. So drainage investments were dropped out either by the funders or for the governments involved, just to minimize the cost, leading to a lot of problems of salinization and waterlogging. Even more importantly, water allocation policies have been extremely negative in most of the world, with water delivered at virtually no cost, which has encouraged overuse, waterlogging, and salinization, leading to significant water quality problems. Some of the solutions that would work here really is first to start with phasing out water subsidies, and I'll say a little bit more about subsidies in general in a moment. Start developing secure water rights for users. In most of the world, we still have a situation where farmers and other water users do not have secure rights to those farms, to the water that they use, leading again to a lack of investment in improving water use efficiency and a lack of income from those water use. Next step after securing water rights is to start moving towards markets in those tradable water rights. That probably has to be done slowly, but I think we've reached the time of the degree of water scarcity that we have to take seriously the need for moving towards water markets approaches that would compensate farmers for being more efficient, rather than in what happens in many cases now, expropriating their water for the use in cities, facing no return. Then also to combine that with devolution of management to local water use associations or joint ownerships, rather than having the top-down management from irrigation bureaucracies. More generally on input policies, again, input subsidies in general have been pretty much of a disaster throughout most of the developing world. They've led to overuse of not only water, as I've already discussed, but energy and fertilizer as well. At at a high level, the levels of subsidies are so large now that in many countries they crowd out public investments, including public investments in education, nutrition, as well as agriculture, research and development, and rural infrastructure. So they have huge macroeconomic impacts well beyond their immediate impacts in agriculture. In agriculture, in addition to encouraging overuse, they skew the use of nutrients and inputs. For example, in most of Asia, favoring nitrogen fertilizers, damaging soil fertility in the long run. Some of the solutions, I think it really again, is time to face the need to reduce and remove input subsidies. They obviously play a role politically and in income support to farmers, but most of the evidence is that you could replace those with direct income support, remove the distortionary effects of those, and still save a lot of money, which then could be invested in things like agricultural research and development and other public investments. Also need much better work, and Gordon's touched on this already, on non-price policies, including location-specific work on soil fertility constraints, agronomics, improved extension, and so forth. Credit already has been mentioned, and I think that is going to be essential. Here, again, the issue is going to be to avoid bringing in credit systems that are hugely subsidized, such as the full crop insurance that you see in the United States. There's a lot of work being done and progress being made on designing weather index insurance and risk contingent credit that could help guard against the increasing variability in weather and climate due to climate change and other factors. Again, it has to be done very carefully. Probably some subsidies are going to be necessary due to basis risk and other issues to do with insurance programs, but they can be kept down a lot lower than many of the systems now that you see in the developed countries. Another area is more broadly on price and trade policy. And here, again, we have a number of ineffective policies that have been in place. Many times I've already met some of the, in addition to sort of direct policies like subsidies, broad price support policies, for example, favoring rice over millets and pulses and other nutritious foods have caused declines in nutritional balance as well as the degradation of food systems in Asia. Trade and exchange rate policies have historically either penalized agriculture by taxing agriculture and favoring industry, or more recently have promoted it unsustainably through subsidies, for example, that try to develop rice self-sufficiency and other kinds of policies. Crop-specific interventions, again, output price and input subsidies, again, have the pernicious effects. So on solutions, we need to remove trade and price distortions, moving towards more open trading systems in agriculture. This is going to be increasingly important with climate change, which is going to, in the long run, shift the comparative advantage across countries, likely leading to greater imports in much of Africa and elsewhere, as well as leading to year-to-year variability in prices and import requirements that will require open markets to get food to poor people in developing countries. Move from single crop approaches to the kind of cropping and livestock systems approaches that Sir Gordon's already mentioned, and invest more of the bang for the buck in research and development to resource conserving technologies to reduce economic and ecological costs per unit of output produced. One of the problems is that these negative policies have a lot of inertia behind them. So how do we start prioritizing these? Ineffective agricultural sustainabilities have been persistent for many years. Where I would say we start out in prioritizing, this is kind of a clumsy word maybe, but start with bad policy resistant investments in technologies, so things that can be least mucked up by bad policies. That really does start with public goods, and I think we do need to get that investment in education, roads, ports, and agricultural R&D that starts that process of helping get good value chains in place and productive, sustainable agriculture in place. Technologies that are embedded in seeds are, in many cases, easier to use than complex local farming systems. That obviously you can still have bad regulatory policies, bad system seed policies, but it's easier for farmers to adopt, say, a drought-resistant variety than to work on integrated soil fertility management policies that may not pay off for 10 or 20 years down the line. So you still need to do that, but I think the extent we can get technologies into seeds, it's better. Low external input cropping systems are potential in parts of Africa, but again, can take us away from a productivity growth pathway. We've already seen from many sources the importance now of decentralized information technologies, which again have bypassed a lot of the regulatory policies and negative policies of governments. Getting cell phone weather and crop information apps out, small sensors that can help jumpstart the kind of precision agriculture for small farmers that Sir Gordon mentioned, radios and so forth. Thank you.